Welcome to this Solution Hacker tutorial. My name is Dominick Lee. I'm an avid inventor, programmer, founder, and CEO of Makitronics. Today, we're going to be talking about how to build a PHP application from scratch. PHP is a very popular platform that's used across various industries and cloud services such as Facebook, PayPal, and more. So, without further ado, I would actually introduce to you the fundamentals of PHP and how to brainstorm and draft a PHP application. Do bear in mind that the concepts introduced in this tutorial might not be applicable for all production purposes. This tutorial is mainly used to bring insights for beginners and for those who would like to get started with PHP. With that said, let's get started. So the first step that you want to do is you want to collect requirements from the client. If you're designing a PHP application by yourself, then you don't really need your requirements unless you have specific key details that you want to note down. If you're designing a platform for a client, you will definitely want to collect various details from them about how they would like the platform to be done. For example, web-based technologies, media assets, and existing databases if they have any. Drawing a storyboard allows you to better understand your client and the UI workflow that they desire. Understanding the view structure and data model. So it is very important to actually understand the view structure and how the data is modeled across the databases, so that you can know how to manipulate and how to write functions to manipulate this type of data. Understanding the functions needed to manipulate the data. So as we just mentioned, you will need to write functions to manipulate this data. Sometimes this can be referred to as CRUD functions: create, read, update, and delete. And then also, you will need to choose a Bootstrap HTML theme. You will also need to choose a Bootstrap HTML theme. Bootstrap is a responsive, powerful web-based system that allows you to build dynamic web pages for various mobile resolutions. Gathering icons and media assets. Gathering documentation on third-party APIs. And this part is optional. The next step we're going to go over is the provisioning stage. We need to set up a LAMP or WAMP environment. LAMP stands for Linux Apache MySQL PHP. WAMP is a similar environment, although Linux is replaced by Windows. Next, you will need to attach a domain DNS to the server environment. This means that your domain will now be able to access the server and that's all its parameters. Then you need to set up a user along with appropriate file permissions. Next, you'll need to set up MySQL databases. This can be set up on localhost or the remote MySQL databases such as AWS RDS. Now you need to set up the SSL installation. Finally, you should test your SSL installation with a tool such as whatsmychaincert.com. Optionally, you can set up a downtime monitor to alert you should your website go down. The next phase is the framework stage. In the framework stage, you should set up your MySQL definitions. This can be your DB config file or other configuration parameters that allows you to access your database. You'll set up your global constants in a config PHP file. Finally, you will turn the views and storyboards that you created into static PHP pages. From these pages, you will extract the header and footer areas since these are not likely to change. Then you will set up the templating areas for dynamic content. We might choose to use a template engine for this purpose. Then you might set up JavaScript alerts. This would be helpful for showing statuses to people after you return a result. Finally, we need to test the HTML forms with webhook site. In the logic stage, we are going to draft PHP functions. I'll be introducing a couple tools that might make your life easier when it comes to drafting PHP functions. We will be drafting MySQL tables. This is where you'll want to get a good grasp on database scheming. We will then need to write SQL queries needed for PHP functions. These functions could be CRUD functions that include create, read, update, and delete. We will be implementing these functions and APIs across the system. Then finally, testing each and every function individually to allow it to work successfully while handling all the errors. Finally, we would like to back up the database schema once we have something that's effectively functional. In the presentation stage, we need to call functions from relevant pages. For example, if you have a home page that needs to call for the user data, you should write a function called getUserInfo that would allow you to get all the information pertaining to a user account. We will need to show appropriate status messages. We'll also need to set up the JavaScript form validation for all forms to make sure that the data coming into the system is sanitized. We will need to test form validation with valid and invalid entries. We will also optimize the views. For example, if there's no data, we should say no data available. We will test for mobile UI compatibility. Finally, we have the interoperability stage. We will declare an API endpoint that allows us to connect with various services. We will set up API routes to various functions that can be called. Then we'll use Postman to test these API routes and see what results we will be getting. Finally, we'll add authentication to make our API secure. Optionally, we can also choose to add API for usage logging and limiting. We would be generating this API documentation with Postman and publishing it on the web. If any of these particular topics interest you, stay tuned for our upcoming tutorial series. Thanks for watching.